Hey, family, it's your sister Jocelyn here, and welcome to another episode of Faith on the Journey. If this is your first time tuning in, we welcome you. We are so glad that you are here and want you to know that we're committed to helping you strengthen your faith, heal your heart, and discover a sense of community. And we do so through a variety of ways by connecting you with a team of Christian counselors who can really walk alongside of you in those difficult moments in your life when you're seeking healing from God. We also offer trauma healing groups throughout the year, and we help churches to start trauma healing ministries. You can learn about these resources and so much more by visiting our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. Now, today we have a guest on the show who is a fellow author who I recently met at a conference, and she has a new book that's coming out that I'm so excited for her to share with you today. Beth is an active member of her church, a homeschool parent, loves traveling, reading, playing video games, and doing so much work in the community. And we're so excited to have her here with us today. So, welcome to the show, Beth.
Thank you.
Yes. So, Beth, you have a great testimony to share that you eventually had the courage to put into a book. And so, I want us to spend a little time learning about your story before we start talking about the lessons that you shared in your new release. So, tell us a little bit about yourself, your life growing up. Just give us a little background information.
I never met my father, and my mother was diagnosed with paranoia, schizophrenia, and was addicted to drugs as a teen. She had all five of her children taken away from her through the authorities, and four out of five of us were raised by my grandmother and grandfather, our grandparents, including me. My grandfather was very kind to me. My grandmother was not. I was singled out as the family scapegoat by my grandmother. A scapegoat is somebody in a group who is isolated or excluded from everyone else in the group, blamed for things they didn't do. People tell lies on them. Scapegoats get gossiped about, and when a scapegoat does make a mistake, they are more severely punished than anyone else in the group. And that's how I grew up. My younger sister was the golden child, and I was not. I was beaten. I was called names. I was cussed at. I had things thrown at me. And my grandmother called me the bad seed. My sister, she got praised, and she got hugs. She got kisses. She got attention. However, when I, would walk in the room, I'd be told to go away. When I told my grandmother I loved her, she wouldn't say it back. When I tried to hug her, she would not hug me back, and it was really rough. The biggest problem I had was, the isolation, and the beatings weren't fun. But being isolated and, not having that loving support, that was really hard, especially from a parent. She was my grandmother, but she was raising me. And my mother wasn't really capable of giving that kind of love at that time. So one of the nicknames I had growing up was Cinderella. It's because I was always cleaning. Every single day, I was expected to clean the entire house by myself, and it took me 2 to 3 hours to do. It didn't matter if, I had been gone all day, got home late, and had school the next morning. I was expected to clean the entire house. If I didn't do it the way that that met her standards, she would yank me out of bed at 3 a.m. and have me not just redo the part that I messed up on or didn't do well. I had to re-clean the entire house. And that's a really, really tough thing to deal with when you're growing up. When it comes to being a scapegoat, there's typically a ringleader who tells everybody or encourages everyone to join in on the mistreatment of the scapegoat. In my case, the ringleader was my grandmother. And, she would tell everybody, hey, look at Beth. She's terrible. Look how horrible she is. And if anybody disagreed with her, that was not good. I mean, there were dire consequences. Most of my family members would just go along with her to avoid the conflict with her. I remember when I was about 10 years old, I was in the dining room and I did something my grandmother didn't like. She started hitting me, and I tried to hit her back. I ended up on the dining room floor, and she had her entire body weight on top of me. I was always very petite, so I was probably about 50 pounds at the time. What's amazing about this is the fact that my entire family, everybody else in the house, was standing in the living room watching this go on and not doing anything. The only person who did anything was my older sister. She handed me a plastic bag to breathe because I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating. My grandfather was in a wheelchair the last years of his life, so he couldn't protect me or stand up for me like he wanted to. And if he said anything, my grandma cussed him out. As far as my siblings go, they were groomed to believe that this kind of aggressive behavior that my grandma gave was okay. It was normal. That's just an example of me being isolated and the scapegoat. And when I was 13, I was playing in the back room with my younger sister. My sister got upset with something I did, and she smacked me in the stomach. And my sister was a lot smaller than I was, and she could have been really hurt by what I did to her, but it didn't occur to me. I was very, very immature for 13. So I was very jealous of her, and I used her smacking me in the stomach as an excuse to punch her in the stomach as hard as I could, which terrible, terrible thing to do. My grandmother, as a punishment, she punched me in the stomach, slapped me across the face so hard that I fell to the floor, and then she grabbed my hair and dragged me across the other side of the house. The next day, I ran away from home. Without resources or money or anything like that, I was very immature. I met this couple, and they were concerned about me. They called the police, and the police, without question, released me back to my grandmother. A couple of weeks after that, my best friend, who's now my sister-in-law, invited me to a youth retreat in San Antonio. And by a miracle, my grandmother let me go to San Antonio to this youth retreat, and that's where I gave my life to the Lord. There's a common misconception that once you're saved, things are just work out really well for you, that things are going to be great. Well, that's a really big lie. After I got saved, things actually got a lot worse for me. A couple of months after I got saved, my grandfather passed away. And it was a really hard time because we were very close. And he was the only adult in my life that was nice to me. And now I had my grandmother who resented me. And the bond between my younger sister and her only got thicker, and I was more and more isolated. The aggression from my grandmother got more severe and more frequent, which seems impossible because, I was getting mistreated daily as it was, but my punishments got more severe. I was locked in rooms. I was beaten with belt buckles. I was scratched with fingernails, had my hair pulled. I had my things stolen from me. I had my things destroyed, including my cell phone being destroyed with a sledgehammer. And it was for really no apparent reason at all. I got accused of a lot of things that I didn't do, things that there's no possible way I could have controlled. It was almost equivalent to my grandmother blaming me for the weather.
There are certain moments in life that wreck us. Whether it's the unexpected loss of a loved one, divorce, betrayal, or abuse at the hands of someone who was supposed to protect us. Trauma can completely shatter our world
Now, many of us have heard that time heals all wounds, but time without the proper care for our emotional wounds will leave us feeling stuck at the source of our pain. We might be able to hide our pain from others, but deep down inside, we know it's still there. If you are tired of running from your past, I encourage you to take one courageous step and schedule a free informational session with a member of our counseling team. Our Christian counselors can provide a safe, supportive environment to process and heal your pain. They understand how difficult the healing journey can be and will walk alongside of you the entire way. Stop running from your past. It's time to heal. Visit faithonthejourney.org for more information on how you can get started today.
What you described is such significant abuse, serious abuse that you experienced. And I wonder, how did you get out of the situation? Tell us about that time in which you were able to transition out of that actual environment.
So I was in my mid 20s. I had ended a relationship. It was a guy I was engaged to, and my grandmother interfered with our relationship and it ended. And when I started a new relationship, she tried to meddle in that as well. And I had, at that point, had enough. And so I left home in the middle of the night, went to my best friend's parents' house, and from there, I got married a year later to my husband, and we have a beautiful child, and I'm taking care of my sister's kids, and my life is blessed.
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, Beth. And I know that there was a lot that happened between you leaving and you having this new life. And so I want to talk a little bit about the in between because even though you left that environment, the trauma that you experienced still carried with you. And so I want to have you spend a little time talking about the work that you started to do as it relates to processing and healing from the trauma that you experienced.
My healing really began after I got married because my husband was very supportive. His sister was my best friend growing up, so he knew the baggage and my background. He told me, from the very beginning, you don't have to live there anymore. And it was learning how to trust people, bring that wall down, that wall of protection traumatized people have, and just learning to build healthy relationships with people. I had grown up around his home a lot, and I saw his family, how they interacted with one another. There was no screaming, there was no shouting, there was no cussing at somebody, name calling. They all seemed happy. I knew when I was younger that our family dynamic was not normal, and I had hope that, one day I would not be in that anymore. They were an example for me, and I made a lot of friends. My grandmother did take us to church. We were church hoppers, but I gained relationships with people in the church, and they were a huge support for me. And I'm still in contact with a lot of the people today, and they loved and supported me. So yeah, it was building the support system and learning how to build healthy relationships. That was the big thing for me.
Yeah, and that's not easy, especially coming from what you had experienced at a younger age. And so, Beth, you obviously went through so much when it comes to your childhood and even being in a positive environment now with supportive friends and the community and witnessing what a healthy family might look like. Did you find yourself still having a trauma response, if you will, where you might have reacted a certain way and you're like, why did I react that way? Did you have moments like that?
Yes, I still do. One, I avoid conflict. I hate conflict, and so I try to avoid it at all costs. My husband hates that because he's like, "We need to talk about this," but I'm like, phew. And secondly, I still to this day blow up over little bitty things, and it's usually not at anyone around me. It's usually anger towards myself. Like if I lose something, or I made a mistake of some kind, I'm really really hard on myself even today. But through my healing journey, I've learned to give myself some grace.
Grace is good. Grace is
Yes.
important. Was there anything else that you turned to help you in your healing process?
Mostly people. Um, my husband was very, very supportive from the beginning. My best friend I have now, she's always an open ear. After my grandmother passed away, a lot of old wounds reopened. So I sought out a counselor, and what I thought was going to be grief counseling evolved into facing all the trauma that I had buried up until that point, really. And I have a wonderful, wonderful counselor. Yeah, I still see her today. But she didn't make me relive the past, even though we talked about it. She helped me get through and face my trauma, even, in a healthy way.
That's awesome. We thank God for good counselors.
Yes.
I always feel like everyone needs to be on someone's couch, on a therapist's couch to talk through things, and that's a critical part of our journey. And so, with you doing the work around counseling and being in this new environment where your husband's loving and you have the support system that you needed, it sounds like you made progress in your healing journey, even though you admitted that there's certain things that you still struggle with, which is honest and real. But let me ask you, when did you get to the point where you said, I want to be bold and courageous enough to share my testimony with others? What made you decide that you wanted to write a book?
It was in counseling. My therapist told me one day in one of our sessions, she said, you've got so many crazy things that happened in your past, you need to write a book. Nobody would believe it anyway because they're just too, crazy. And so I started reflecting on what she said, and I felt led to share this, not only to help others, but to get the truth out there and let everybody know.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you chose the title Scapegoat. Tell me what made you say, I'm going to choose this title for the book.
So, growing up, well, actually, talking with a lot of my family members after my grandmother's death, a lot of them finally came forward and said, you were the scapegoat of the family. And I reflected on what they said, and I was like, yeah, actually, I guess that describes it perfectly. So that's why I chose that. The Confessions of a Scapegoat.
Yeah, it's very suitable. And you brought up your family. Did you have to work through forgiveness as one of your main areas of focus for your healing process?
Not really with my family members that witnessed and did nothing, because I know it was to avoid conflict with my grandmother because she was the conflict. I mean, always. So that was understandable to me, especially like my siblings, because they grew up from the very beginning, witnessing this. So they were basically groomed to think this is normal. With my grandmother, before she passed away, I thought I'd forgiven her. She became not actually nice to me in her last few years of living, and I thought I'd forgiven her, but what I'd actually done was push down all of that trauma inside of me and try to move on. Well, after she passed away, when I was in hospice with her, because I took care of her in hospice the last 6 days of her life. And she became very, very aggressive, and that opened up the wounds. After she passed away, I realized I didn't actually forgive her. What I did was I pushed it all down. I have forgiven her, but forgiveness is very complex. It's more complex than the textbook statement of, forgive and forget. Forgiveness can be a process. You can be mad at someone and still forgive them, and you don't have to bring somebody completely back into your life if you've forgiven them. And for her, I don't excuse any of the things she did to me, but forgiveness is more for the offended than the offender, because when you hang on to your anger, you're giving up your control. You're letting that other person have power over you. But when you choose to forgive them, you're set free from that and you have your power back.
Yes, I completely agree. And I'm glad that you were able to release that because now you are at a place through forgiving and doing your work around your own healing to help others through your book. And so I would love for you to share just a little bit about the primary lessons that you want someone who reads your book to walk away with.
The biggest takeaway in my book is to love yourself. When you love yourself enough to physically and mentally healthy, you can heal in the way that you need to.
So, Beth, in this process of learning how to love yourself and be kind to yourself and go through the process of healing, what else did you learn about God's faithfulness through this process?
Well, God helped me through the healing process by showing me who I am in Him. I was groomed growing up to believe that everything that my grandmother said to me and about me were true. I believed I was stupid, useless, worthless. Through the healing process, God showed me that I'm worthy, I'm loved, and I'm His. And names I was called were not true. Those names are not from God. So I learned who I am in Christ.
Amen. Ah, I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Beth, for sharing your story. And I know that I can't wait to pick up a copy of your book. I know we can learn more about how we can grab a copy as soon as it's released from mrspacebooks.com. So I encourage everyone to visit this website to learn more information, and we'll have details about your social media in the show notes. But thank you so much, Beth, for being courageous, being vulnerable, and sharing your testimony with us today. I'm really grateful to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you all for tuning into this episode of Faith on the Journey. Oh, wow, we heard amazing testimony by Beth today, and I hope that you were encouraged in knowing who you are in Christ. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I need you to do me a favor and subscribe. We're on YouTube, and also share this. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Help us to reach the masses with this message of helping people to know that God's a healer and that our faith can sustain us through these difficult times and help us on our journey. Also, if you're looking for a Christian counselor, please visit our website at faithonthejourney.org. Again, that is faithonthejourney.org. There you can find out not only about our counseling, but also the trauma healing groups that we offer, the trainings that we offer for churches to become trauma informed throughout the year, and so much more. So take advantage of those resources on our website. And that's it for now. And so we thank you for tuning in this week. And until next time, you keep your faith on the journey. I'll see you soon, family.